PR Connections Radio presents.
Welcome to Vegas Hockey Hub here on PRConnectionsRadio.com, the voice of new media. I'm your host, Ian Rickelli, and we have a really good show planned for everyone watching all around the world. As we were talking about a week ago, we are doing our 2024 NHL trade deadline report cards. So we have done report cards here on this show in the past. We did it for the mid-season report card. We did a report card last season at the end of the year. And what we are doing for this episode of Vegas Hockey Hub is I am going to be doing our report cards, breaking down the entire NHL trade deadline. And I'll just be giving a grade on what I saw from the teams in the NHL. Now, how this is going to go is that we're going to start with the Pacific, then Central, then Metro, then Atlantic. Okay? That's how this is going to go. This is how it's going to start out. And we are not going to do it in any alphabetical order, anything like that. It's just going to be just based on division. So, we're going to start with the Pacific, and I have to start with a team that I know everyone wants to know about. A team that has made blockbuster move after blockbuster move after blockbuster move. And of course, I'm talking about the team right behind me, and that is your Vegas Golden Knights. Because the Vegas Golden Knights has been no doubt the best team at the trade deadline. The Vegas Golden Knights getting an A+ should be a no-brainer. Because when it comes to your Vegas Golden Knights and this being Vegas Hockey Hub, and I do appreciate everyone in the chat, by the way, everyone who's in there commenting, tagging people, I do appreciate everyone who is supporting Vegas Hockey Hub. Now, when it comes to the Golden Knights organization, they went out with a bang because they've lost a few games recently. They're towards the bottom of the wild card picture right now. So when it comes to your Vegas Golden Knights, they made a statement. They made a statement, and they did it loudly at the trade deadline. So the first move they made was calling up the Washington Capitals and getting Anthony Manta. And when it came to this trade, it's really fascinating to stop and analyze what they gave up for Anthony Manta, because there's really not that much in the grand scheme of things, as all they gave up was a 2024 second and a 2026 fourth round pick. To me, that is a good haul that you can give up for someone like Anthony Manta, a middle six forward, a guy who is a defensive-minded, two-way type of guy. He scored 20 goals this season for the Washington Capitals, so he has done a really stand-up job in Washington, in the past in Detroit. He'll be a good middle six forward to have here in Vegas. Day two, they call up a division rival, the Calgary Flames, and they get a star defenseman in Noah Hanifin. And with Noah Hanifin, people in the hockey world, you already know what he can do. He is a guy who is still in his young age. He's in his 20s. But what you can see from a guy like a defenseman in Noah Hanifin is a future first defensive pairing mate with Alex Pietrangelo. And that's exactly what this trade was. The Vegas Golden Knights went out and got a defenseman who they could team up with Alex Pietrangelo for years on end. And then the final day of the NHL trade deadline, 10 minutes before the trade deadline was about to end, I'm driving to California. I'm doing all of that. And what happens? What pops up on my phone as I'm driving to California? Tomas Hertl from the San Jose Sharks, a guy who is a prolific goal scorer, a guy who has been a thorn in the side for the Vegas Golden Knights, gets traded. A bitter rival in San Jose helps out the Vegas Golden Knights by trading away Tomas Hertl to your Vegas Golden Knights. Now, does it sting that they had to give away their first round pick, David Edstrom, who they drafted last year? Yes, for sure it does. But to get a guy like Tomas Hertl, who when he is healthy, is one of the best scorers in hockey, and the fact that they will have him under contract for the next 5 seasons is a big deal for Vegas. So you give up Edstrom and a first-round pick for Tomas Hertl. You give up a second and a 6 for Anthony Manta. And then you give up Daniil Miromanov and some draft picks for Noah Hanifin. But overall, when it comes to your Vegas Golden Knights, they get an A+ for the NHL trade deadline because of what they did in this deal. So, Vegas Golden Knights, they get an A-. There's no doubt about it. They did a really good job. They went for the fences and they swung and got a home run when it came to the NHL trade deadline. I'm a huge fan of what they have done. Now, moving over to the next team in the Pacific Division, this is someone who I actually like the moves they've made. I'm in the minority here, and that is the Seattle Kraken. The Seattle Kraken, they knew that they were in kind of towards middle territory. They were kind of just staying around the 500 mark. They're kind of fighting for a 9th seed right now in the Western Conference, might not make the playoffs. So they get a second-round pick and a future 4th-round pick from the New York Rangers. They give up Alexander Wenberg. He's going to try to help the New York Rangers win a Stanley Cup. But what I appreciate about Seattle is that there's a very slim chance they make the playoffs. So they sold off an asset, and they get future capital with draft picks in this deal. So Seattle Kraken gets a B. I appreciate what they did during the NHL trade deadline. The next team that we do have to talk about is the San Jose Sharks. And you know what? If you're a San Jose Sharks fan, I feel bad for you. I have a really good friend of mine who's a Sharks fan. I had to text him when the Tomas Hertl trade went down. Shout out to him, by the way. He does a show on Tuesday night. Stay tuned live. Go check him out. But when it comes to San Jose Sharks, what they did is pretty much give up assets to bring back futures. They got a prospect in Jack Thompson and a draft pick to give up Anthony Duclair. They get Devin Cooley, a goaltender for the future, someone they can maybe have long-term from the Buffalo Sabres. They get Vanacek from the New Jersey Devils in exchange for a future goaltender on the back end. And they did get that first-round pick, and they did get a promising prospect in David Edstrom from our Vegas Golden Knights in exchange for Tomas Hertl. The reason I give it a C is because I personally feel like the San Jose Sharks could have gotten more. Now, I'm going to be greedy as a Golden Knights fan and say that I'm happy they didn't. But just being realistic, you got a prospect and a draft pick back for Duclair. You could have gotten maybe some more back for Tomas Hertl. But I will say for the San Jose Sharks, they get a C because of the return they got from Tomas Hertl. Feels like they maybe could have gotten a little bit more. The next team that we are going to be mentioning when it comes to the Pacific Division is going to be very short and very quick, and that's the Los Angeles Kings, because simply put, they made 0 moves during the NHL trade deadline. Let me get this straight, Rob Blake, who, by the way, might get fired this offseason depending on what happens. Rob Blake, let me understand this. The Kings are a 6 seed right now. The Kings are trying to make it to the playoffs once again, and you make no moves. Very questionable choice. Let's see if it pays off, Cotton. I mean, when it comes to the Los Angeles Kings, it's shocking that they made no moves at the NHL trade deadline. So because of that, they get a straight F because they didn't participate. They didn't even try when it came to the NHL trade deadline. Now, a team that did try, and I will give them credit, is the Edmonton Oilers. The Edmonton Oilers get a B+ because they're trying to go for it. You have Connor McDavid, you have Leon Draisaitl, you do have some good depth when it comes to your organization, but they add a little bit more. You get Sam Carrick, you get Adam Henrique from the Anaheim Ducks. Yes, you did have to give up a first-round pick in order to get Henrique and Carrick, but the Edmonton Oilers somehow, some way, win a Stanley Cup. That first-round pick would be worth it. They did acquire a defenseman in Troy Stetcher from the Arizona Coyotes. Didn't have to give up much in that deal either. So overall, for the Edmonton Oilers, for them buying at the trade deadline, them being a 5 seed right now in the Western Conference, second in the Pacific Division, the Edmonton Oilers get a B+ because they are trying to make an attempt to win a cup with Connor McDavid. And honestly, I respect that. A+, yes. Vegas Golden Knights, absolutely. Vegas Golden Knights get an A+. They were the winner of the trade deadline for sure. And then you said the Golden Knights decided to fold. I think they just realized they're not going to be a playoff caliber team, so they decided to fold and move on. And then the last 2 teams we do have to mention from the Pacific Division is we're going to go over to the Calgary Flames. I wasn't really excited by the Calgary Flames. I'm going to get a C for Calgary on this one, mostly because you do get back Kuzmensko. You do get 2 prospects. You did get a first-round pick in exchange for Elias Lindholm. That is a good move there. They do get 2 defensemen from the Vegas Golden Knights, Braden Bahal via waivers, Daniil Miromanov from the Noah Hanifin trade. But what the Calgary Flames were really trying to do here was stock up on draft picks. They were selling off assets to get draft picks. So you trade away Christopher Tanev, you trade away Elias Lindholm, you trade away Noah Hanifin. That's what the Calgary Flames were really trying to do here. And on one hand, I understand why they did it, but to me, it seems like Calgary, I give them a C, especially with the Tanev trade. Feels like could have gotten maybe a little bit more for him. But overall, the Calgary Flames get a C when it comes to the NHL trade deadline for 2024. And then on the Anaheim Ducks side of it, this is going to be controversial, but I have to say this. The Anaheim Ducks get a B+ from me. I am a huge fan of what Anaheim did. This is an Anaheim Ducks team that is building on futures. So you trade away Jamie Drysdale, you trade away a second-round pick in 2025 to Philadelphia to get Cutter. And Cutter is someone who has a lot of upside. If he can figure out and maybe get away from the organization he was having in Philly, maybe he could turn it around in Anaheim. I like the move they made there. They did get some quality depth by bringing in Lidstrom from Montreal, bringing in Lagesson from Toronto, and then you got Ben Myers, who can help out the bottom 6 from Colorado. And most importantly, for Anaheim, they got a first-round pick for Adam Henrique. Philadelphia Flyers are a good young team. I will say when it comes to your Philadelphia Flyers, they made some solid moves, and I'll talk about them in a little bit. But when it comes to Philadelphia, them getting Jamie Drysdale, them getting a second-round pick from the Anaheim Ducks, it was a good move for both sides. I think these are 2 prospects that were not really panning out for each other. So Cutter goes to Anaheim to get a second chance. Drysdale goes to Philly to get a second chance. And then as we finish out the Pacific Division, the Vancouver Canucks, I left them for last, and there's a good reason for it. Because the Vancouver Canucks, they made their trade well before the trade deadline. The Vancouver Canucks went out and got Elias Lindholm in January. So even though it technically does count at the NHL trade deadline, they made it such a long time ago that I chose to leave it for last. It was the only big move they made. They're first in the Pacific. That's why Vancouver did what they did. They gave up a first-round pick. They gave up a couple of prospects, and they gave up Kometsko for Elias Lindholm. So I will say for the Vancouver Canucks, they get a solid B because of the big move they made, but they really didn't do anything else substance-wise except for one move. So that was the Pacific. Now moving over to the Central side, I actually wanted to do this just because I really fascinated by the Central Division. And the first team that we do have to mention is one of the best teams they've had all year in the Winnipeg Jets. I give them a B-. This is an organization that really needed to make some subtle trades, not anything flashy, but kind of subtle. Getting defenseman Colin Miller from the New Jersey Devils, that's a good move on their hand. Acquiring Sean Monahan for the Montreal Canadiens. Yes, you had to give up a first-round pick to get him, but so far he's paid off dividends. So the Winnipeg Jets, they get a B+ on that front because they did make some good moves, but they didn't make a lot of moves on the back end. St. Louis Blues, flat out F. No nice way to put it. The St. Louis Blues get an F for the NHL trade deadline because similar to the LA Kings, the St. Louis Blues made the equivalent of 0 moves at the NHL trade deadline, and that's all I have to say about them. Moving over to the Nashville Predators, because this is an organization that I feel like could have done a little bit more this NHL trade deadline. You did get Anthony Beauvillier from the Chicago Blackhawks, Jason Zucker from Arizona. Yes, you do get some depth on the middle six, but it feels like the defense was pretty much left intact in Nashville. And when you have a guy like Soros in net, maybe getting one more defenseman could have helped out the Nashville Predators. So I give them a C+ for making the attempt, but it feels like they just abandoned the defense. Minnesota Wild, look, they get a C. I mean, it's a Minnesota Wild team that's trying to compete for a playoff spot right now, but at the same time, they're also trying to move stuff around. You do get Will Butcher from the Pittsburgh Penguins. They do acquire some draft picks and getting some capital back by getting away from the Pat Maroon contract. They do give away some good players there. But for the Minnesota Wild, for the most part, they just kind of made some neutral moves when it came to Minnesota. And the final team that we are going to be talking about is a team that did deserve an A at the trade deadline, and that is the Dallas Stars. The Dallas Stars needed to get some defense to protect their goalie in Jake Ottinger. So what did the Dallas Stars go out and do? They acquired Christopher Tanev from the Calgary Flames. They went out and got a defenseman who's going to immediately help the blue line in Dallas. So when it comes to Pete DeBoer and that organization, they made a fantastic move with the Calgary Flames. And as they say, the rich get richer. Well, the Dallas Stars, who are trying to win the Central and try to make it back to the Stanley Cup Finals since 2020, they made a solid move here. They get an A when it comes to the trade deadline. And the Colorado Avalanche, they are next here, and I have to be kind of nice while not being. The Colorado Avalanche get a B+, but it's because of one trade. There is one trade that stops them from being an A to being a B+. Sean Walker, that is a good move. Getting him from the Philadelphia Flyers. Sean Walker, solid defenseman. He'll be good on the blue line. No complaints there. They get Casey Middlestat from the Buffalo Sabres. They do have to give up a guy in Bowen Byram. That's a bit unfortunate, a young defenseman. But the Colorado Avalanche have so many young defensemen right now. Bowen Byram was kind of left stranded at certain points. I'm not mad about that move either. But what I find a bit interesting about the Colorado Avalanche is they didn't go out and get a backup goalie. Alexander Georgiev is a solid goalie, all-star caliber goalie. But the fact that the Colorado Avalanche did not build and actually get a backup goalie is a bit surprising at the trade deadline. And because of that sole reason, that is why the Colorado Avalanche, to me, get a B+ and not an A at the trade deadline. Just because they didn't go out and actually get more job security and get more depth when it came to being in the crease for the Colorado Avalanche. So Colorado Avalanche get a B+ here at the NHL trade deadline, and it's just because of that one aspect there. And then the last team we are going to mention about the Central is the Arizona Coyotes. Now, look, they are selling off assets. It is no shocker here. They trade away Jason Zucker, trade away Troy Stecher, trade away Matt Dumba. But the Arizona Coyotes are in a weird limbo right now. To me, they're the equivalent of the Seattle Kraken in the Pacific, whereas they're not going to be competing for a playoff spot, but they're not bad enough to sell off any good prospects, and they're not actually good enough to buy and get any good players. So for the Arizona Coyotes, I give them a C. I mean, it was just kind of an average trade deadline for them. Not much we could talk about there. And before anybody asks me, well, Ian, what about the Chicago Blackhawks? They get a C. All right, Chicago Blackhawks get a C. I mean, what else do you really want me to say about them? Except for the fact that they did make some moves, but it was really no great moves in Chicago. Now, moving over to the Eastern Conference, and let's actually start out with the Philadelphia Flyers. I said I was going to be doing them later on. And the Philadelphia Flyers organization get a B+ at the NHL trade deadline because they did what they had to do to beef up the defense. You get Jamie Drysdale from the Anaheim Ducks. You acquire Eric Johnson from the Buffalo Sabres. But more importantly, this is a team that got away from the Sean Walker deal. They acquired him from the LA Kings back in this previous offseason. But they unload him and they get a future first-round pick. And if you're the Philadelphia Flyers, that first-round pick will be valuable when the time comes. So Philadelphia Flyers did a really excellent job at the trade deadline. I am happy at what the Philadelphia Flyers did. And considering they're trying to compete for a playoff spot right now, they made some excellent moves at the trade deadline. So to your Philadelphia Flyers out there, because I saw Thomas earlier, you get a B+ for the trade deadline. I like what you did. You did make some moves in the right direction, and you got a first-round pick in exchange for Sean Walker. You know, Columbus Blue Jackets, this is going to be probably the easiest one I can do. The Columbus Blue Jackets, in terms of getting back futures and getting back some young talent, get a B at the trade deadline. The Columbus Blue Jackets getting Alexander Nylander. They do get Malcolm Subban, Jacob Zorba. There is some young talent that Columbus did get. You'd had to give up Andrew Peeke. I understand that. But when it comes to the Columbus Blue Jackets, they are a terrible team right now, but they are trying to build for the future. They did get some futures back. I have no complaints with this. So Columbus Blue Jackets get a B at the trade deadline. Washington Capitals, they get a B. Look, this was a team that everybody knew was going to be selling off, and they trade away Mantha, trade away Kuznetsov, they trade away Edmondson. I mean, this is a Washington Capitals team that is unloading assets as they're trying to prepare for the end of Ovi in a couple of years. So Washington Capitals get a B. I'm not in any complaints there. They did get some good draft picks back. I see no complaints here. The next team that we are going to talk about is the New York Rangers, the team that's trying to win a Stanley Cup right now. But this is going to be a hot take here. I wasn't impressed with what the New York Rangers did. They did get Alexander Wenberg from the Seattle Kraken. They did get Rusev Lasovic from the Columbus Blue Jackets. But they really didn't fix the defense. I mean, this is a defense that has a solid first defensive pairing, and they have a strong second defensive pairing. But, man, outside of that, they really don't have much when it comes to the blue line. I thought maybe they could have strengthened it maybe just a little bit more, but they did not. So, New York Rangers get a C+. I just think very underwhelming what they did. New York Islanders, this is going to take 20 seconds. Flat F. This is an F for the New York Islanders because you made no moves. Just like the Kings, just like the Blues. If you make no effort, I'm going to give you a straight F. Completely unacceptable. The New Jersey Devils, they get a C. I mean, this was a very weird offseason, which happened earlier. But this trade deadline was even more weird for the New Jersey Devils. Yes, you do get Jake Allen back. He'll be a good backup goalie. You do get Kaapo Kähkönen from the San Jose Sharks as a goaltender. But them getting Tyler Toffoli, only a second and a third for Tyler Toffoli, it felt like they just panicked at the wrong moment. That's generally what it felt like. It felt like they just did not get enough for Tyler Toffoli, so they panicked and got a second and a third instead of waiting out just a little bit more. And New Jersey Devils, maybe they'll make the playoffs. I don't think they will. But if they do, this trade deadline was not their best effort. Continuing with the NHL trade deadline report cards here on Vegas Hockey Hub, the Pittsburgh Penguins, oh man, I don't know how to be nice about this one. You get a C. Michael Bunting would have been good a couple of years ago, but now his contract is going to be a burden for the Pittsburgh Penguins. Yes, he had to give up Jake Gunzel. He had to give up Ty Smith. They go to Carolina. We'll talk about that later. But to get Michael Bunting and then get some futures back and get some guys on the bottom six, like Benstrom, like Sirkovic, this is a Pittsburgh Penguins team that really looks terrible. Riley Smith probably should have gotten dealt. I'm shocked he didn't. And the longtime trio of Letang, Malkin, and Crosby, it's coming to an end. The fact that you trade away Jake Gunzel really tells you that the end of an era in Pittsburgh is coming very soon. I wasn't happy. I wasn't proud. I actually wasn't even I didn't even look at the trade deadline and say, wow, they made some good moves. They just didn't. Carolina Hurricanes, man, I'm so happy to talk about this team. A team that I had going to the Stanley Cup final to begin the year, they get a B+. Not only do they get a backup goalie in Spencer Martin from the Columbus Blue Jackets, but they did acquire Jake Gunzel and Ty Smith from the Pittsburgh Penguins. That strengthens their team. You do get Evgeny Kuznetsov from the Washington Capitals. That builds up your center depth. And they even acquired a 6th-round pick by trading Cade Weber to the Toronto Maple Leafs. So overall, the Carolina Hurricanes get a B+. Very solid job in Carolina. I like what they did at the trade deadline. And we have about 5 minutes left when it comes to the trade deadline. So let's go over and let's focus on the last division, and that is the Montreal Canadiens. And this is going to be a hot take, but I actually like what the Montreal Canadiens did. They get a B+. You do get some young guys like Jacob Perreault from the Anaheim Ducks. He's a young, up-and-coming right wing, someone who could help out the Montreal Canadiens in the future. You do get a first-round pick for Sean Monahan, and considering how the Winnipeg Jets do, that will be valuable. But overall, solid job by Montreal. Florida Panthers, an organization that really did what they needed to do, and that was build up on their depth. They get a B+. They acquire a Stanley Cup champion in Vladimir Tarasenko from the Ottawa Senators. That's a solid move there. Good top 6 forward. Then they get a bottom 6 forward and a former captain of the Buffalo Sabres and Kyle Oposo. And you do get some good depth and some young guys like Tobias Bjornfoot, who they acquired on waivers from the Vegas Golden Knights. So Florida gets a B+. I like the moves they made. Very stand-up job by Florida. The Ottawa Senators, I'm going to be very nice here and say they could have gotten a better haul for Vladimir Tarasenko. But considering he had a no-trade clause and considering he could dictate where he wanted to go, I understand why they got back such a measly return in Ottawa. I mean, this is just an organization who just has not done well the past couple of years. They've kind of been in the hockey purgatory, as I like to call it. I mean, this is just Ottawa. It's an organization that exists. Moving on. So C+ for Ottawa. Wasn't really impressed by them. Detroit, they get a C. And it's mostly because they didn't make really any big moves. You do get Radim Samik and a 7th-round pick from San Jose. It did give up Kostin. He goes over to San Jose. But yeah, Detroit really didn't make any moves. Made just some very minor shuffling around. But yeah, they get a C out there in Detroit. The Buffalo Sabres, anybody out there in Buffalo, you probably aren't going to like my comments here, but that's okay. Buffalo Sabres, they get a B and not an A. And the reason I give Buffalo a B is, look, you did get Bowen Byram. He was a fantastic addition for you guys. You do get some players off your books, like Eric Johnson, like Kyle Oposo. But what I will say about the Buffalo Sabres, the fact that this is a Buffalo Sabres team who it feels like for the 8th trade deadline in a row is selling at the trade deadline worries me. It actually worries me that once again, Don Granato, Kevin Adams, Terry Pagula, the Sabres organization is selling at the trade deadline again and again and again. So yes, you did get a good call. Bowen Byram will be a good defenseman you could have for the future. And those draft picks might turn out to something. We don't know. But when it comes to the Buffalo Sabres, they're just selling off assets once again instead of competing for a playoff spot. The Tampa Bay Lightning, this is an organization that gets a D+. I mean, Anthony Duclair, Matt Dumba, these are guys way past their prime. Tampa Bay is trying to kind of squeeze into the playoffs at this point. And they went out and reached and got some older guys. D+. I was not happy with these moves at all. Boston Bruins, they get a D. This is a Bruins team that, once again, you get Pat Maroon, you get Andrew Peeke, but this is an organization that's trying to win a Stanley Cup, and they made very small moves at the trade deadline. The Boston Bruins get a D at the trade deadline. I was not impressed at all. And then the Toronto Maple Leafs, as we get towards the end of the show, get a D+. Joel Edmondson, really? Your best move was Joel Edmondson. What are you doing, Toronto? But it doesn't matter because the biggest move and the only move that really mattered was this right here. So the Vegas Golden Knights get an A+ at the NHL trade deadline here on Vegas Hockey Hub. And until next time, I'm your host, Ian Rickelli. Continue watching hockey, go support junior hockey, and go Knights, go.
PR Connections Radio thanks you for watching this podcast. Check out more episodes of this show and our others at prconnectionsradio.com.